Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're gonna go through the 50 best tips, tricks, hacks, and features of a thermostat. And if you've cut this video, this will be the first 10. So let's get right into it. Number one being the auto changeover. I did a video a long time ago on this feature on a certain thermostat, but most thermostats, whether it's called auto changeover, maybe they use a different verbiage called temperature range or however they call it, but basically it's a range you can set on that thermostat where if you live in an area like I do, where there's certain times of the year that maybe it's a little chilly at night and you want the heat to kick on just to knock the chill off, and then it gets a little warm during the day and you just want a little AC to try to kind of cool it off a little. And instead of just constantly changing heat to cool, you can set a temperature range, and whether it gets above or below that range, that thermostat will tell that system to come on. Number two, a lot of thermostats have some sort of auxiliary heat. Sometimes they'll have multiple terminals. They'll have an aux heat, AUX, E for emergency heat. Sometimes they'll even have 3 different ones, and the third one being like a W1, W2. A lot of thermostats, they're all in one anyway, but just keep in mind, even if you have a thermostat that has 2 of those or all 3, your system itself might only have one backup heat source or one stage of backup heat. And so a lot of times with a lot of those thermostats, we'll actually end up, adding a jumper in there. So if I've got an aux and an E, so whether I put that thermostat in emergency heat or I have it in regular heat, but I want it to still bring on those backup heat strips, for example, whatever that backup heat source is, I might actually jumper those 2, so that way it still controls that one backup heat source. Number 3 would be the backup heat stage timer, or I know some brands call it something different, but basically it's a timer that you can set, so that way that thermostat gives your first stage heat a chance. It's literally a timer, it's got a set amount of time. And so if you set it at, say, let's just say 30 minutes or an hour, whatever that you set it at, it will give that first stage heat, so maybe a heat pump, a chance to try to reach temperature before it brings on backup heat. And so in a lot of cases, your backup heat draws more energy, whether it be electricity or some sort of fossil fuel, but it's going to draw more energy than what the first stage heat would be, and that timer is going to give that system a chance to reach temperature before bringing on that more energy consuming backup heat source. Number 4 would be batteries. I did a whole video a while back called 3 HVAC secrets that heating and air contractors don't want you to know. And in that video, on the second secret, I talked about a company I used to work at where a guy would add batteries knowing that when they got low, that customer would end up having to call back with another service call. And I got a lot of flack for that. Some guys saying, oh, I've never seen that before and the blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, I wanted to touch on batteries in this video because there are some thermostats that you just don't have a choice. So if that thermostat's not hardwired, you don't have a common wire going to it, or that thermostat, if it were to lose power, you would have to reprogram it every time the power were to go out, or it just simply would not come back on. And sometimes you would add batteries to those thermostats so they would operate correctly. Ultimately, even if that thermostat has a low battery warning or error or whatever, just keep in mind, sometimes those batteries start to get low. You could have a malfunctioning thermostat and it never even tells you that they're starting to get low. A lot of our customers that have batteries, I'll tell them, hey, every New Year's Eve or every 4th of July, just pick out something on the calendar that you will remember. I can tell you every New Year's Eve, I go through at my house and I change all the smoke detector batteries. And I have a few other things that I just do. I do it every year, once a year. And I think if you have batteries in your thermostat, that should be one of them as well. Just once a year, just go ahead and get new batteries, fresh batteries put in there, and you'll never have to worry about it. The other thing I'll mention is, keep in mind, a lot of thermostats have sensors. So you could have an outdoor temperature sensor, or you could have an indoor temperature sensor of some type, and a lot of those sensors are also battery operated, and you want to make sure you're replacing those batteries from time to time as well. Number 5 would be zoning, and I wanted to touch on that with thermostats because keep in mind with most systems, your thermostat is what we would call the brains of the system. So it's going to send voltage on certain wires, or maybe if it's a communicating one, send a communication signal to the indoor or outdoor unit saying, hey, this is what I want to happen because it's gotten hot in here or it's gotten cold in here, whatever. But I wanted to touch on that because if you have a zone system, so if you have a house that has multiple thermostats, you know, each zone has a thermostat and maybe a damper or two that control the ducts and the airflow to that particular zone, keep in mind the thermostats are not the brains of that system. If it's a zone system, 9 times out of 10, there will be some sort of module mounted close to the indoor unit, and that thermostat is sending voltage on certain wires or that signal saying, hey, this is what I'm seeing in my zone. This is what I want to happen. But ultimately, that module is what decides what opens, what closes, what gets turned on, what happens at that point. Why does that matter to you? Well, if you were to go in and try to change that thermostat and you were to not program it correctly or wire it correctly back in, you could have problems with that thermostat sending the wrong signals to that module and have an issue. And then if you get a heating and air pro in there and they're not really used to electrical schematics and trying to figure all those things out, you could really have a problem on your hands. Number 6 would be a simple one, and that is cleaning your thermostat. A lot of thermostats, if they're touchscreen, will have some sort of cleaning mode or setting in there so you can actually turn on that mode and wipe down the screen really good and not mess with the settings of the thermostat. But also in addition to that, I tell some of our customers from time to time, you know, whether it's vacuuming the thermostat around it a little bit or getting you a can of that compressed air that some people will use for electronics or in the office, maybe cleaning their keyboard. Get one of those and just kind of shoot it up in there, just kind of blow some of that dust out of there. You should have less problems. Just keep in mind, a lot of thermostats have some sort of sensor in there that keeps track of the temperature, and that's how it decides what it's going to do. Well, if all that stuff gets dirty, the electronics, the sensors, or whatever, I've had thermostats over the years that do have issues because of that. Not huge issues, but you'll get to where the thermostat doesn't read quite as accurately as it used to. Maybe it thinks it's one temperature in the room when it's actually a couple degrees hotter or cooler. But ultimately, just trying to take care of that thermostat. It's just like any other electronic. You want to keep it clean and all that good stuff. Number 7, a lot of thermostats have what we would call an eco mode and an energy saving mode. And a lot of them, it's just as simple as just hitting a button or a setting on the home screen and just telling the thermostat that you're caring more about energy savings than comfort. Some thermostats you have to go a little further and go into the programming and change it from either comfort or energy, whatever the verbiage is. But basically the two options are you're telling that thermostat, hey, I care more about energy savings. I want you to try to give the first stage more of a chance before you bring on backup stages, and just try to save as much energy, run as little as possible to keep the home comfortable. Whereas the comfort setting, it isn't afraid to run any stage, and it usually wastes no time going to a second stage or third stage or whatever, however the thermostat is set up. Basically running more at a level of comfort for you and trying to get there as quickly as possible typically. Might use a little more energy, but it's gonna be a little bit more comfortable. I know there are some thermostats, say like Train and American Standard, have a setting where it'll say like aggressive recovery or something of that effect, and basically that's what it's saying. You want it to be more of a comfort. It's trying to reach heating or cooling quicker, run at a higher speed, or not waste any time making it to a second stage. Number 8 would be a compressor protection delay. And what that is, a lot of thermostats have some sort of delay. If you make a change to that thermostat, if you change modes or temperature, it'll have some sort of delay, so that way there's no short cycling. In the old days when we had mechanical thermostats, so whether it being a mechanical mercury bulb or some sort of lever with a spring, however the thermostat was set up, those thermostats, you could actually turn them up and down quickly, and you would send voltage to the compressor, and at times short cycling it with that initial spike of energy, and you could actually make compressors fail because of it. It's not good for a compressor. And as time went on, a lot of systems, heat pumps, ACs, started coming out with delays on the boards themselves, and that's still not uncommon today. Some of them will have some sort of delay if it sees a quick jolt of energy or the power were to flicker or so on. But as time went on, as we started to see more and more digital thermostats hit the market, they themselves had the delay in them. So if you were to change the mode or the power were to go out and back on, before that thermostat just sends voltage to that outdoor unit, it will have some sort of delay. Number 9 would be humidity control. A lot of thermostats on the market today can be also used as a humidistat. Years ago, it would be a whole separate little unit. So you'd have your thermostat on the wall, and then you'd have your humidistat that would control either a humidifier or dehumidifier, depending on your home's needs and where you are in the country. But as time has gone on, a lot of thermostats themselves can control the humidity and those items. Whether it's dry contacts in the thermostat itself, or a lot of communicating thermostats will have the signal sent to the indoor unit and the dry contacts would be located there. Wherever it is, a lot of those thermostats, again, can control humidifiers, dehumidifiers, and so on. And finally, 10, I saved this for last in this video because I think it's a really neat feature, and that is customer service. And you might say, well, what do you mean customer service? I mean, we're talking about a thermostat here. And what I mean by that is a lot of thermostat manufacturers years ago would only cater to contractors. A lot of them didn't even sell to homeowners, but as time has gone on, a lot of them will sell directly to homeowners. You can go to a hardware store, big box store, and buy thermostats yourselves. And because of that relationship, they want to sell direct to consumer. A lot of them have some sort of customer service where they will help you. So you don't have to hire a pro in all cases. If you call them directly and you say, hey, this is kind of what I have, this is what I'm seeing, you know, I got this going on, I'm replacing my thermostat with yours, and so on. A lot of times that customer service will help you wire or program your new thermostat. Now, they're not going to help you fix your air conditioner in most cases, but they will help you if you are installing their product and you're having an issue, you're not quite sure where a wire goes or how something should be programmed. They will help you with that. All that said, I hope that helps. If you're in the market for a heating and air system and you're not in Griffin Air's coverage area, before you spend thousands, check out my website, newhvacguide.com. I've put so much stuff on that website, it's as if I wrote a book, but instead of a book that would become outdated, I can add things, change things to this website. But I put so much information on there, a lot of it heating and air manufacturers and contractors don't even want you to know. I've got a whole page called no-nos, things to stay away from. I've got a page for my favorite heating and air brands versus ones that I'm not such a fan of. All that can be found on the website, but if you are in Griffin Air's coverage area, if you're in Virginia, in the Northern Neck, Middle Peninsula, down through Williamsburg, Virginia, give us a call. We'll give you a free estimate and the best warranty in the area, and we'd love to earn your business. Thanks for watching. Hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next time. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're gonna do the top 50 features, tricks, tips, hacks, whatever you wanna call it, of thermostats. And if you're catching this video, this will be 11 through 20. So this is the second video. So check out the other ones. But let's get right into it. Number 11. Different brand thermostats use different colors to do different things. And you want to keep that in mind when you're wiring in your new thermostat. So you might be thinking, what? All thermostats don't have the same set of codes, same set of, schematics, and they're all wired the same? Unfortunately, no. A couple examples. When it comes to the common wire, I've noticed that different brands use different color common wires. Commonly, it's going to be, usually black, blue. I have seen gray used before, but ultimately you want to keep that in mind if you are wiring in a new thermostat. Another example might be Trane and American Standard. When you're installing or replacing one of their thermostats, sometimes they'll have a B terminal, and a lot of folks will use the blue wire for that. But with just about every other thermostat on the market, B means something totally different. With Trane and American Standard, it's your common wire, but with those other thermostats, it's your reversing valve, energizing, and heating mode. Number 12, a lot of thermostats have error codes. So if something's wrong with your system, you will get an error or or some sort of alert. And that could be a big problem or it could be a small problem. Sometimes those error codes could be just popping up because they're alerting you that the Wi-Fi is no longer connected or something like that. But sometimes if you get an error code, it means something is wrong with that system and you need to get a pro to look at it. Number 13, extended fan runtime. Basically, this is a feature that if you are in a mode, say AC mode or heat mode, and it reaches your desired temperature, so you have it set at 72, it's now reached 72 and the system is going to shut off. Extended fan runtime would make that indoor fan motor continue to run longer even after the outdoor unit or furnace has turned off. And you might say, why would you want that? Well, there's a number of different reasons. One might be if you are burning a fossil fuel of some type. So let's say you have a gas furnace and you have now burned the gas, you've got this heat exchanger holding all this heat, and you don't want to waste that energy. You can have the fan run a little longer after the system has reached temperature just to go ahead and blow across that hot heat exchanger so you don't waste that energy. Another reason you might have the extended fan runtime would be in AC mode. If you are getting some sort of odor, I've heard it called the dirty sock syndrome, and you might actually have the extended fan runtime run longer after that air conditioner has reached temperature and shut off. Sometimes that will fix your issue because what happens is the evaporator coil actually gets wet, which is why we have condensate drains and all that fun stuff. And the extended fan runtime, the idea is it continues to blow across that coil for a little bit longer, dries the coil out after that air conditioner is turned off. Number 14, this isn't necessarily a feature of a thermostat, but I wanted to touch on float switches because sometimes if you have float switches or auxiliary switches, some sort of switch on your system that if something were wrong, maybe the drain has backed up and it's no longer draining properly and now you have a float switch that is open, that will affect your thermostat. So in some cases, it may stop sending voltage entirely to your thermostat, which would be why you would have a blank screen. But in other cases, it can be an alert or error code like we touched on a moment ago. Some communicating systems will have an alert setting on the board that those float switches will open if something is wrong. And then you'll get an error code or alert on your thermostat. Number 15. This is something that has kind of come along over the years. Years ago, when I first started out in the trade, this was not a thing. And of course, I'm talking about geofencing. If you're not familiar with what geofencing is, essentially the idea is your thermostat knows whether you are home or not, and it will operate accordingly. What it can do in a lot of cases is it will see your cell phone leave the property and it knows you're not home, so it'll become whatever setting you have it at because of that. Or it sees that you are coming home, it can see your cell phone getting closer, and it knows that you're about to get home and to turn the system on. So that way it's comfortable when you get home. Now, I've actually had customers say that they don't love that they don't like geofencing. They don't want Big Brother knowing whether or not they're home. And if you're one of those folks, just keep in mind a lot of smart thermostats today do have geofencing capabilities. Number 16, and this feature is called holds. So if you have a thermostat that has a hold on the thermostat, essentially in most cases what that is if you are running a schedule on that thermostat and you were to make a change or want to stop running the schedule entirely, you can actually put a hold on that thermostat. So for example, you're running a schedule, it's doing whatever the schedule says, so that thermostat's acting accordingly, and now you're going to tell the thermostat, you're going to change the temperature, and maybe you have to hit hold, or hold will actually automatically turn on with some thermostats. But either way, you're essentially telling that thermostat you no longer want to run that schedule for a certain amount of time, if not permanently. Now, there are temporary holds and permanent holds. And the difference is, if you have a temporary hold on that thermostat, in most cases, you're going to change the temperature and it's going to temporarily hold at whatever temperature you've now set it at. And until that thermostat reaches the next scheduled set point in the scheduling, it will hold at that. So that's why it's a temporary hold, because once it reaches that next scheduled set point, it will go back to running the schedule. And then obviously a permanent hold is a permanent hold. It's going to permanently hold on that temperature until you tell it otherwise, until you tell that thermostat, hey, I'm ready to run the schedule again. I can tell you personally, there are certain times of the year that I do run a schedule in my home, and then there are other times of the year that I run a permanent hold in my home. So every home is different, every market is different, every climate is different, but essentially that is on there for when you're running a schedule. Number 17, indoor air quality. And this is a term that's thrown around a lot in our trade these days. A lot of contractors are signing on and becoming almost like indoor air experts. And we have all kinds of products on the market to clean air and make it better, safer to breathe. And the reason I wanted to touch on that with thermostats is a lot of thermostats today can connect to a lot of these indoor air quality products. So you can control it, whether you want it to be turned on or not. Whether you want ventilation to be turned on, maybe you want to turn on the humidity more. In our last video, we talked about how you can actually control a humidifier or dehumidifier with a lot of thermostats. And actually, these days, they have air monitors that will tell the thermostat what's going on in your home. It's going to see particulates and see all these problems, humidity, whatever, and it'll tell the thermostat if there's an issue. Number 18. Indoor sensor location. And I put this on here because I've had customers have thermostats and they don't necessarily like where it's located for one reason or another. Maybe it was installed way too close to the kitchen, so it's getting, every time you cook in your house, your home gets cold. Or maybe it was installed in direct sunlight. You can get an indoor sensor and install it in your home where you actually want to measure the temperature, and that thermostat will go by that temperature instead of what it's seeing if you set it up that way. And you never have to move the thermostat. The thermostat can stay where it is. You don't have to pay somebody to move wires and get crazy and all these things. You can just remount that sensor in the location you would like. I remember a few years ago I had this gentleman, he had his thermostat located in a bedroom that was affecting the entire house, and he wanted it relocated to his living room. And what we did was we just installed an indoor sensor where he wanted it, and we didn't even have to move the thermostat. Number 19, maximum temperature settings. And what this is, a lot of thermostats, you can actually set it. When you program it, you tell that thermostat, hey, I don't want you going above a certain temperature, and I don't want you going below a certain temperature. So whether you have kids or just in general, for whatever reason, you don't want that thermostat to ever be set above a certain set point. A lot of thermostats, you can set that and tell that thermostat from the get-go that's what you want. Some thermostats use other verbiage. I've seen some of them call them thresholds and things like that. You're telling that thermostat you want it to stay in a certain range. I can tell you personally, when we install a thermostat in someone's home, I will usually set those ourselves. So I'll set the maximum set point for 80 degrees, the lowest set point at 60 degrees, and basically I'm keeping the customer in that range so that way they don't get above that or below that and have other issues. And finally, number 20, you can name your thermostat. Yes, I said you can name it. Now you might be saying, why would you want to name your thermostat? Well, the reason is some houses, whether you have zoning, which you'll have multiple thermostats in there, and you want to name each one, when you pull it up on your app or on your computer and you're controlling it through Wi-Fi, you can name each one of those thermostats. And then of course some homes have more than one system, and again, you can control all of them just by naming that thermostat so you know where exactly you're controlling. I can tell you in my house, we have a upstairs and downstairs, so I have a thermostat that is called upper and lower level. Some thermostats have set names, so you just have to pick one of the names on the list, but some thermostats, you can actually do a custom name and call it whatever you want. All that said, if you are in the market for a heating and air system, before you spend thousands, check out my website, newhvacguide.com. I basically wrote a book on this website, but instead of a book that would become outdated, I wanted a website that I could add to and change as new technology comes out. I've put so much information on there. It's all meant to help you as the homeowner buying a heating and air system. Some information I give you on that website, heating and air contractors and manufacturers don't even want you to know. I've got a whole page called No-Nos, things to stay away from. I've got a whole page about my favorite heating and air brands, and I tell you why. So check that out before you spend thousands. All that said, thanks for watching. Hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next time. Hey guys, in this video we're going to talk about the top 50 tips, tricks, hacks, features, whatever you want to call it, of thermostats. And if you've caught this video, you've caught one of 5, and this is going to be 21 through 30. And so let's get started. Number 21 is actually not necessarily a feature of the thermostat, but it's more of a thought process. I've actually had this question a few times, and I remember starting out in the industry, and this was something that people would talk about from time to time. And that is, for the most part, there is no such thing as overworking the thermostat or system. And what I mean by that is, in most cases, most thermostats, unless it's a communicating thermostat, most thermostats, there are switches in the inside of that thermostat that open and close based on what's going on. So what I mean by that is if you set a temperature and that thermostat is working the system and they eventually reach that temperature, all it does is open a switch inside and tell that system, hey, I've now reached temperature and you can turn off. So this thought process of you turned it up way too high, you know, if you set it at 80 instead of 72, it's going to make it work even harder. It's going to reach 72 a whole lot faster. It's just simply not true. The only exception to that rule that I can think of off the top of my head would be sometimes if there's what we would call a heat droop discrepancy between the ambient temperature, meaning the temperature in the room, and the set point, the temperature you have set on that thermostat. If there's a large enough gap, it will bring on other stages in the system in some cases. So one example of that might be if you have a heat pump system and it has a 2-degree heat droop internally, or it's programmed that way, and it becomes a bigger gap than 2 degrees, then it's going to bring on second stage. That would be the only thing I can think of off the top of my head. I had a customer just the other day, they said, well, hey, you know, we turned the temperature up really high, so maybe we broke it. And I told them, you know, it's not, either there's something wrong with the system or there's not. There's no turning the temperature up and you broke something because of that. And I'm sure I get a lot of other heating and air guys, and they'll quote on my videos and they'll tell me exceptions to some of the things I say. I would still say, even if they think of one and they comment on this video, I would still say in most cases, 9 times out of 10, what I just told you is fact. Number 22. This is a pretty cool feature. It's something that has kind of come out in the last few years, and a lot of brands are getting on board. And I don't necessarily know the verbiage to use, but basically it's a notification that a lot of brands are setting up that it can notify your contractor through some sort of system on the internet, however it's set up. But basically, if there is an issue with your system, your contractor will know about it. A lot of these manufacturers are actually charging the customers money for this feature, and depending on what that number is, it may or may not be worth it to you. But what's really cool about it is if you were to have that capability, a lot of times if there was something wrong and your contractor was notified about it, they can already be having you scheduled, getting you into their system, getting an appointment on the books, and then they'll be contacting you to say, hey, look, you know, we're seeing this going on, we just got this notification, and we can definitely help you out with that. So again, if that's something you're interested in, ask your contractor about it. A lot of them, again, a lot of brands are starting to sign on to this. I know Trane and American Standard had the capability a few years ago. I know Daikin now has that capability. I'm sure Carrier does. All the big dogs usually will have the same sort of stuff. But again, with a lot of these manufacturers, they are charging some sort of fee for that sort of capability. Number 23. This is a subject that I get asked about all the time, and that is the O or B functions on a thermostat. Now, when I say B, just as a quick disclaimer, we're not talking about Trane and American Standard thermostats. Some of those, some of the older ones especially, B would actually be your common wire, but 90% of all other thermostats, B is going to be your reversing valve if you were energizing in heating mode, whereas O is going to be your reversing valve if you are energizing in cooling mode. And so in a lot of thermostats, it's sometimes even the same terminal. It'll say O/B, and you land your wire there, and then you tell the thermostat what type of system you have. The reason all this matters is if you have a heat pump system, all a heat pump is an air conditioner that can run backwards in the wintertime. And so basically it'll run backwards and your indoor coil will get hot instead of cool, and that's how you get heat from the heat pump. Well, what controls all of that is your reversing valve. The reversing valve is what tells that system I want AC mode or heat mode, or if I'm in heat mode, the reversing valve is what then puts it in the defrost mode and gets the coil clear of ice. So like I said, some of those it's one terminal, some of them it's actually two separate terminals. You'll have an O or a B and you land it on which one is for your system. But for the most part, I'll say this: if you are buying a new thermostat and you're trying to figure out, you know, what do I need to do with the O or B, most brands on the market are going to be energizing in O. It's going to energize in cooling. Rheem and Rude are exceptions to that rule, and Bosch, during the making of this video, Bosch is also an exception to that rule. There might be a few others. Definitely check with your local contractor if you're not sure on how to wire it. Again, most other brands, all your other big brands, Daikin, Trane, Carrier, Lennox, all of those are going to be on O. Number 24. This would be your outdoor temperature sensor. So in a lot of thermostats now, you can actually install an outdoor temperature sensor, and that thermostat can either tell you what that temperature is, and in some cases, it will actually operate based on that temperature. So for example, if you have a dual fuel system, it may lock out the first stage heat and go to the backup heat if it gets below a certain temperature. And in most cases, you can actually set that yourself. It used to be years ago, you would actually have to install a whole separate module, an external fossil fuel kit, but these days you can buy a thermostat that has dual fuel capabilities and have that outdoor temperature sensor. Some sensors use batteries, some sensors are wired. Which one's better? Honestly, it's kind of up to you. It's kind of up to your contractor preference-wise. To be honest with you, I like a wired one just because there's never any batteries that need to be replaced, but there are times that if it's wired and it's in the same cable as a lot of your other low voltage stuff, it can mess with that temperature reading, and that has been an issue before. We've had folks, you know, call in and say, hey, I'm having an issue here or there, and we have to pull a whole nother separate cable just to go to that outdoor temperature sensor. That said, just because I touched on dual fuel, just realize a lot of thermostats today that are coming out, they actually do the temperature reading for the outside because of the internet, and they do not have an outdoor temperature sensor unless you install one. So just keep that in mind as well. Number 25, let's talk real quick about what I would call the pinch tabs or the screws of thermostats. And the reason I wanted to touch on this is if you have screws that need to be tightened down on the wires themselves, you've got a terminal block, you want those screws to be tight. But I'm seeing where folks are installing these pinch tab thermostats. It's kind of the new thing. A lot of the big brands have them on their newer thermostats. Nothing wrong with them if they're installed properly. But what I would say in most cases, if you do have pinch tabs, when you stick that wire up in there, kind of pull out on that tab a little bit. You don't have to be a He-Man about it, but just pulling out on a little bit, making sure that it's pinching, it's making a good connection, and you should have less issues. It's not a big common thing, but there are times when folks will install those pinch tab type and have issues because it's not making a good connection. And the other thing with the pinch tabs, I've touched on this in other videos, but a lot of thermostats count on those pinch tabs. That's what I call them, pinch tabs. But just those tabs that you push in on when you slide your wire in, the thermostat itself can see which one of those are being used. And in some cases, those thermostats will operate differently based on what it's seeing. So it won't even give you the option to program it for a heat pump if the O or B isn't even inserted and that tab is pushed in, if that makes sense. Number 26. This is probably one of my favorite features, and I kind of stuck it right in the middle of all of this on purpose. And this feature, we'll call it the preheat feature. And a lot of different thermostats call it different things. I know Honeywell calls it the adaptive intelligent recovery. I think Nest calls it early on, and some other brands call it smart recovery. Whatever the verbiage they use, I call it a preheat function, just kind of as a blanket rule, depending on what verbiage they use. But ultimately, basically what you're telling that thermostat, if you turn that function on, so if you have the adaptive intelligent recovery or the early on, or whatever the verbiage is, if you turn that on, because in some cases you can turn it off, what you're telling that thermostat in most cases is you're running a schedule and you want it to reach that temperature at that time. So what do I mean by that? If you have a thermostat that says, okay, in the morning I want it to be this temperature, and then let's say in the afternoon at 3 p.m. I want it to be 72 degrees. So I had it set for lower than that, but now I want it to be 72 at 3 p.m. Well, if you don't have the preheat or the smart recovery or whatever turned on, that thermostat won't actually start trying to do that until 3 p.m. So if you have it set at 3 p.m., it'll get up to 259, bam, then it'll turn on, and then it will try to reach that temperature. But if you have the recovery or preheat settings turned on, a lot of those thermostats will actually learn your home or your system, and they will learn how long it takes for it to reach that temperature. So if you have it set at 72 at 3 p.m., and that thermostat knows in most cases it's going to take it about 15 minutes to reach that temperature, it'll actually come on at 2:45. So for example, if you get home every day at 3 o'clock and you want it to be that temperature when you get home, that system knows, hey, I need to start at 2:45. That way when you walk through the door, boom, you're comfortable. Number 27, reminders. In most cases, it's actually not that big of a deal as far as technology wise. In a lot of cases, it's just a timer inside of the thermostat, but you can set up reminders on thermostats to tell you to do certain things. So for example, you can tell that thermostat every 30 days, I want to be reminded, I want to be told I need to replace my air filters. Or every year or every 2 years, I want my UV bulb to be checked or replaced. Maybe you'll have a reminder for your humidifier pad or your ventilation filter, whatever. There's all kinds of reminders, and in some cases, some thermostats, you can even set custom reminders. But ultimately, it's just a timer inside the thermostat. You can turn it on and it will tell you when to do certain things because you have those reminders turned on. Number 28. We've kind of already touched on this with a few of the other features, but most thermostats coming out today are now able to run a schedule, or are what we would call programmable. It can run a schedule to some degree. And so years ago, that was kind of a thing, right? So when those things first started coming out, thermostats themselves were still pretty basic. They were just on and off, and you just set the temperature sort of deal. And then all of a sudden, these scheduling thermostats started coming out, and they were kind of a big deal. But I would say in most cases, 8 out of 10 thermostats coming out today have that capability. Even the cheap ones have some way of programming them to a degree. They might not have quite as many programmable times, meaning, they might not be able to set for every day and 4 set points for each day or whatever. But most of them you can run some sort of schedule and save energy or added comfort or whatever reason you're running that schedule. Some thermostats even have modes. So you have a vacation mode. So you're running a schedule, you can hit vacation or turn on vacation and tell that thermostat, hey, I'm not going to be home for a little while, and it will operate however you've told it that. And in a lot of cases, vacation mode, you can adjust that accordingly as well. Some thermostats are pretty easy to set the schedule. You just kind of go on the screen and you hit a couple buttons and you can get something scheduled. Some thermostats, it's actually easier to go through their app, their software, maybe on a computer, and you've got it connected through Wi-Fi, and it's easier just to program it that way. I would say if you have a new thermostat, try it both ways. If you want to run a schedule, try it both ways. Figure out which one makes more sense, because that makes a big difference, I've noticed. Number 29, screen lock. You can actually lock the screen, and some thermostats there's like a partial lock, and then there's a full lock, and then some of them it's just a full lockdown regardless. And you might say, well, why would I even want that? I would say in a lot of cases, especially with residential, you probably will never even use that function. But what's nice about it is if you do have somebody that adjusts the temperature and you're not happy about it, I can tell you that we have a co-work space for our office, and I locked the screen on it because a lot of folks, even customers would come in for some of the other businesses and they'd mess with the temperature and it would be super hot or cold in there. So I actually locked the screen because of that. But the first time I ever heard of that function was we were doing some work at a dorm for a college years ago, and they went through and they replaced all the thermostats with these thermostats that you could lock the screens and control through Wi-Fi, because the students kept changing the temperatures. And usually if it's just a degree or two, nobody would even notice. But you get these folks, they're like, oh, I'm cold, and they turn the temperature all the way up. That's when folks are like, okay, I need to lock my screen down here. And finally, number 30, this has become the thing in the last few years, and that is all these technologies coming out. So you've got Amazon Alexa, you've got Google Assistant or Google Home, and Apple Siri can even do this, but you got all these different technologies coming out in the home smart home technology, and a lot of thermostats can connect to these devices. And so usually it's just as simple as, if you are buying a thermostat, just look on the box. It'll usually have logos of the different technologies that it supports, but it does give you the ability by saying one sentence, so you can say, Alexa, hey, change my temperature, or whatever. I've actually got an Echo Dot in this room, and I'm surprised it hasn't gone off since I've said Alexa a few times. But yeah, you can just walk through your door and tell the thermostat, just by talking to your device, what temperature you want it to be. And in some cases, even if you just want to change a degree or two, you just tell it, you just yell out, and it'll control that thermostat for you. So I hope that helps. If you're in the market for a new heating and air system, check out my website, Before You Spend Thousands, newhvacguide.com. I basically wrote a book on this website, but instead of a book that could become outdated, I put so much information on there that a lot of heating and air manufacturers and contractors don't even want you to know, and I can continue to add to it as new technology comes out and so on. I've even got a page called No-Nos, things to stay away from. I'll walk you through the entire process, ways to avoid the headaches that a lot of homeowners are dealing with today. And I even have a page now for heating and air favorites and not so favorites. So check that out, Before You Spend Thousands. Check out that website. I appreciate you watching. Hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next time. Hey guys, welcome back to the 50 top tips, tricks, hacks, features of thermostats. And if you've caught this video, this is just one of 5. In this video, we're going to go through 31 through 40. So let's get started. 31. A lot of thermostats today are connected to some sort of smart home technology. That's kind of the verbiage that they're using. What you need to know as the homeowner is that as you're shopping around and you're looking at thermostats, a lot of these thermostats, because of smart homes and all this different technology coming out, you can get a thermostat that actually connects to all of that in one. And so a lot of the brands are coming out with their own technology where with one app, you'll be able to control the thermostat, your security cameras, other appliances, electrical components like lights in your home. They're coming out with all kinds of stuff. So if that's something you're interested in, keep that in mind as you're shopping for your next thermostat. Number 32. When you're buying most digital thermostats and you're setting them up, a lot of them will ask you, what is the type? What is your system type? Even if they use other verbiage, basically what they're asking you is, what type of system do you have? Do you have a heat pump? Do you have a conventional forced air furnace? Do you have fossil fuels versus electricity? Do you have a boiler? Baseboard heat. Maybe you only have a cool only, air conditioning only system. And then lastly, does your system control the fan, or do you want the thermostat to do that? If you are installing a thermostat and you get that question and you don't know the answer to it, please hire a professional. You might open a can of worms that you didn't mean to when you install that new thermostat. And that segues into my next one, which is 33, and that is, you can have Wi-Fi capability on almost every type of system out there today. And what do I mean by that? So I just went over system types. If you get a Wi-Fi thermostat that controls that system, you can control it through Wi-Fi. Now, what's the big deal with that? Well, I've had customers in the past where they might have, ductwork in their house, their air conditioning, maybe even a heat pump system, and that's how they get their air conditioning, and they got a Wi-Fi thermostat, updated technology with that system, but in the same exact house, they'll have a whole separate thermostat hanging on the wall that still feeds that old boiler that's been giving them heat for all those years, or their old baseboard heating, or whatever. Most systems today, you can get a Wi-Fi thermostat, and as long as you know what you're doing and setting it up, you can control it through Wi-Fi. What if you have zoning? What if you have a boiler that has a thermostat in each zone? What if you have a heat pump system that has multiple zones with dampers that open and close? Maybe you have a mini split system, so you got a wall hung in this room, a floor mount in this room, maybe a pancake style ducted mini split in another part of the house, and you've got a zoned mini split system with one outdoor unit controlling all of those indoor units. And the question becomes, with all these different types of zoning systems, can you have Wi-Fi capability? Can you control it from your phone or your computer? Maybe you're on your way home and you want to adjust the temperature so it's comfortable when you get there. And do you have that capability? And I would say 90% of the time the answer is yes. Is there a few exceptions to that rule out there? Yes, but for the most part, the answer is yes, you can have Wi-Fi capability. Number 34, temperature correction. I've had this call so many times, seems like at least once or twice a year, and that is someone that calls in and they say, hey, my thermostat's not reading correctly. I've got a thermometer mounted right beside it, and the thermostat isn't matching it. Or I've got some sort of psychrometer, some sort of humidity reading device, and it doesn't match the thermostat. So the cool thing about a lot of thermostats on the market today is you can adjust that temperature reading. Meaning you can go into that thermostat and you can say, hey, look, I think you're 3 degrees higher than what it actually is in this room, and adjust that back down. Do I think it really matters in the grand scheme of things if that temperature is dead on? No, I don't think it's going to change the actual operation of your system. You're not going to be any more comfortable if you adjust that temperature. The system's going to do what it's supposed to do regardless of what you have it set at versus the new temperature you're now telling it is. But ultimately, if it bothers you and you want that thing to be accurate, you want it to be dead on, you can adjust those thermostat temperature and humidity readings. Number 35, heat droop or temperatures for staging. What I mean by that is, I'll just use heat droop for example. All of them have their own little verbiage, but this is one of my favorite features that a lot of thermostats have on them, and that is you can adjust what the ambient temperature versus set point difference is before it brings on another stage or backup heat, for example. So let's just say you have, let's say a normal heat pump system with backup heat, whether that's a furnace or electric heat strips. You can set a heat droop, whatever that temperature difference is. So you might say, oh, well, I want a 3 degree heat droop, or I want a 2 degree heat droop. If you have that set on 3, if it gets down to 3 degrees between that ambient temperature that it is in the room and what you have it set at, it will then bring on the backup heat and help heat that system. Some thermostats, if the heat droop's on 0, it might even say comfort or no heat droop, no temperature staging. And so we talked about a backup heat stage timer in one of the other videos, and I like to use those in tandem. So I like to set maybe a 2 degree heat droop, and if it gets down to 2 degree difference between that ambient temperature and set point, then I'll turn the backup heat stage timer on for say 30 minutes. And so when it sees that 2 degree difference, it's going to do the 30-minute timer, and if it still sees that 2 degrees or more, then it'll bring those heat strips on. Ultimately, you're giving the first stage heat a chance. You're giving it a chance to try to heat the home and reach temperature without having to use more electricity or gas. Number 36, wall plates, or sometimes they're called trim kits or back plates, depending on what the brand is. But ultimately, if you have a wall plate, a lot of times you can hide the old footprint of the old thermostat. So what do I mean by that? Have you ever seen where somebody has removed the old thermostat and installed the new thermostat, and it doesn't take up the same real estate on the wall, if you will? Maybe the old one was this big and the new one's only this big. Well, you can get back plates to install behind that thermostat, and it will cover all that. And in most cases, they're not too bad looking. They just cover up the problems on the wall where the paint stopped, and it makes the thermostat more cosmetically pleasing. Most wall plates are pretty inexpensive, and in a lot of cases, you could probably get it and install it yourself. But again, if you don't feel comfortable, definitely get a pro to do that. Number 37. This is one of my favorite features that some of the newer thermostats have started coming out with. I remember a couple years ago when I saw the first thermostat with this feature, and of course I'm talking about the weather. And so a few years ago, I saw a thermostat that said, hey, you know, here's the temperature you have your house set at, here's what the temperature is in the house, and oh, by the way, here's what's going on outside. Here's what your high and your low are going to be today. And I just thought that was pretty cool. And now that time's gone on, we're seeing more and more thermostats have that feature. Number 38. This feature is one of my all-time #1 gotta haves if I'm talking to a customer. And I'm talking about alerts from a thermostat. So years ago when Wi-Fi thermostats first started coming out, you know, you start talking to folks, well, you know, you can control it from wherever, you can adjust the temperature before you get home, make it comfortable before you get home, all these different things, right? And all that's pretty cool and it's great for comfort and all that good stuff. But now Wi-Fi thermostats being able to alert you if something's wrong is way more powerful. So if the temperature in your house has dropped below a certain temperature, that thermostat can literally email you and say, hey, it's gotten too cold in here. I remember years ago, my wife and I were on our way, we had gone out of town, and I got that email. It said, hey, your house has gotten down to 63 degrees, you know, just want to let you know. And it was totally because I had been running a schedule and I'd hit vacation mode. We were going out of town, not thinking, and I was able to, from my phone while on the road, turn up the heat for the cat. We still had a cat at home and I was able to turn on the heat for the cat. But a lot of these alerts, it's not just temperature. They'll alert you if there's a problem with the humidity, if it's too high or too low, ventilation, and even indoor air quality. So we're starting to see more and more systems come out with air monitors installed in the system, and it'll alert you if it sees something wrong, if it sees something unsafe that you're breathing in your house or someone else could be exposed to. It'll send you an email and say, hey, look, here's what I'm seeing. Just want to alert you. Number 39, wireless thermostats. And no, I'm not talking about Wi-Fi. I'm actually talking about a thermostat mounted on your wall with no wires. You could pull it off the wall and there's nothing going on behind it. Why would you want a wireless thermostat? I think there's lots of reasons why you may consider one, but one might be is if you do not like your current thermostat location, maybe it's being hit by the sun certain times of the day. Maybe it's too close to a vent and it's getting blown on and it's adjusting the temperature. Maybe it's in a room with, say, a fireplace and it's making the rest of the house cold when you have a little fire in your fireplace. Whatever the reason is, maybe you just don't like where that thermostat is located. You can install a wireless thermostat wherever you want it. It's almost like a remote control for a TV. You can set it, put it wherever you want in your house, as long as it's within a certain distance. You install a module at the air handler or furnace, and that wireless thermostat can talk to it and say, hey, you know, turn on the heat, turn on the AC. This could save you gobs of money because if you were to relocate a thermostat, and sometimes, some cases, it could be quite pricey just to move a thermostat, to relocate the wiring. Maybe you might have to cut a couple holes in the drywall to get that thermostat moved and that wire moved to the new location. Forget all that, get a wireless thermostat, install it wherever you want to, and you'll be good to go. Little disclaimer, if you do get a wireless thermostat, just keep in mind, it'll have batteries that need to be replaced from time to time. Still not a big deal, but just letting you know. And finally, number 40, fan settings. This is probably one of the questions that I get the most from homeowners. They'll say, hey, you know, I've got these different modes. I've got auto, on, circulate. I've got all these different modes. Which one should I put my house on? And we can go through the pros and cons from each one. I would say in most cases, most homes across the United States, the majority, maybe 60 to 70, maybe even 80% of those houses probably just need to be on auto, especially if you don't have any sort of indoor air quality accessories or anything added to the system. There's really no point for you to continue to circulate air. Now, is there something to be said for circulating more air, can remove more stale air in your home? You're circulating that air throughout the house and you're going to have better comfort because there's more equal temperatures? Sure, I've heard that argument made, but obviously your fan's running more and it will consume more electricity. Now, before one of those guys gets on here and he comments, I get hate messages all the time. Yes, I know it's minimal, but I'm just saying if you are the homeowner and you turn that fan on, it will consume more electricity, obviously. And so when digital thermostats first came out, they then added this circulate function where it's kind of in between. It's not really on all the time, but it's not just on when the system's calling. It's got a circulate function where that fan will come on every now and then and circulate air throughout the house, moving air, making it more comfortable, removing stale air from the house. And the hope and dream is that you have better comfort. I've done other videos on humidity and setting the fan to on and all that sort of stuff. I'm not going to get into all that in this video, but it's just pretty cool that most thermostats on the market today, you have more than just one or two options now. They're coming out with all kinds of stuff. And last little disclaimer before we wrap up is just realize if you are running some sort of schedule, a lot of times you can control in that schedule what your fan setting will be as well. So maybe there's certain times of the day or week that you want to do just auto. Maybe there's other times you might want to circulate or just turn it on and have it running constantly. We had a business not that long ago where they were taking care of kids. It was like a daycare, and they had us install one of these thermostats. And so when they were open or there were kids there, they had it circulating air, maybe even had it turned on. But then that program, if it got to be after hours or at night, it would go back to auto. So anyway, that's it for this video. Before you go, if you are in the market for a heating and air system, before you spend thousands, before you hire a contractor and get taken advantage of, I built a website to help you through the process, to avoid the headaches, to avoid the scams out there. And it's called newhvacguide.com. It's as if I wrote a book, but instead of a book that would become outdated, I'm able to add everything to this website, change it as I need to, and I've got so much information on there. A lot of heating and air contractors and manufacturers don't even want you to know. I've got a whole page called no-nos. I've got a whole page for good and bad heating and air brands. So check that out before you spend thousands. Check out New HVAC Guide. But that's it. Thanks for watching. Hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next time. Hey guys, welcome back to the top 50 tips, tricks, hacks, features of thermostats. And if you caught this video, it's one of 5, and this is the final one. So we're gonna go through 41 through 50. Let's get started. Number 41, backlight. So as digital thermostats started coming out, they started having the capability of being able to see them in the dark. So that was something new, something that no one had seen before with the old mercury style or mechanical thermostats. Now as time has gone on, you can actually control that backlight. So I just had a customer just the other day say that they actually enjoyed the light and they hated that they had to touch the screen just to get it to light up, and we were able to change the setting to where it stayed lit up all the time. Some thermostats you can control how long it will stay lit once you touch the screen or touch something to get it to light up. And then of course some thermostats, if you just simply don't like the light, you can turn it off entirely and not have a backlight. Another thing is a lot of newer thermostats are starting to come out with like accent lighting and things like that. Some of them make them more cosmetically pleasing, but some of them will actually tell you what mode it's in. So if the light is blue, you know, it shines a little cool little blue light on the wall, or a red one down the wall, then you know which mode that thermostat is in. Number 42, during the making of this video, for the most part, most systems are either gonna be communicating or 24 volt low voltage AC voltage thermostat. So for the longest time, it's been one or the other. So as communicating thermostats have been coming out, they are usually somewhat proprietary. So depending on what brand system you put in, you need to put in their communicating thermostat. Or if it's a low voltage AC thermostat, then you could pretty much install just about any thermostat found at a big box store, and they're pretty interchangeable. But now as time has gone on, we're starting to see a little bit of crossover, and I wonder as time goes on if we're gonna see a lot more of that. And so what I mean by that is we're starting to see some brands make thermostats that can control different ones of their brands. So what I mean by that is now you have Carrier, who also makes Bryant. Carrier makes Infinity, brand has Evolution. It's pretty much the same thing. Daikin is also making some of their thermostats that use the same technology across brands, and I think you're going to see more of that. We also are seeing some systems on the market that they can do one or the other as far as the system itself. So for example, I know Daikin especially has certain systems on the market that you can install a communicating thermostat, or you can change the settings and install just a regular 24-volt AC thermostat. Number 43, we kind of touched on this in the last video. A lot of brands are coming out with air monitors that can connect to the thermostat. And what that is they can actually monitor the air and tell you if something is wrong. And it will send you alerts if there's something wrong with the particulates, or if there's high carbon monoxide in the air, or whatever. It'll send you alerts based on what that air monitor is seeing in your system. And during the making of this video, there's really only a few air monitors on the market that work with only certain brands. But I think as time goes on, if you see this video in the future, I think you're going to see a lot more of them on the market. Number 44. This isn't something that we're seeing a whole lot with newer houses, but I do know back in the day this was sort of a thing, and that is if you install a thermostat on the wall, but you're not getting the most accurate readings, or it's kind of acting a little wonky. Some days you feel like it should be heating a little better than it is, or cooling a little better than it is, and it's not necessarily accurate with the readings, or it's giving you some sort of weird readings when it comes to the humidity. And one thing that can sometimes fix that is if you have a hole behind that thermostat that the wire comes through. So you got this hole in the wall, the wire pokes through, and then you install your thermostat. Sometimes if you seal that hole, and you can seal it a number of different ways, but if you seal that hole, that can sometimes fix your issue. So for example, if it's really hot in the room, but for some reason that hole is connected to the cavity in the wall that comes from, say, the basement, and you're getting a little bit of cool air coming to that thermostat, it could throw your readings off. Number 45, if you have a loose thermostat on the wall, sometimes that can be easily fixed just by tightening the screws or the fasteners that are holding it to the wall. But sometimes if the wall has seen better days, maybe they've installed a couple different thermostats and with all the multiple holes in the wall, and sometimes to fix that loose thermostat, you may actually have to go behind that thermostat and rebuild it out some way, shape, or form. I'm not going to get into all the different ways that you can repair that. Just realize there are multiple options out there that you can use to make that thermostat tight again. One article I read recently said that it can actually throw off your readings of your thermostat if it is loose. I'm not necessarily saying that that's 100% true in all cases, but I think there is something to be said for if you have a loose thermostat, maybe if you're pushing buttons and it's kind of rocking, it's not good, and also is not necessarily cosmetically pleasing if you walk into a room and the thermostat's crooked, right? Number 46. This is one thing that's not necessarily talked about a lot in the thermostat market, and that is a lot of brands make retail residential thermostats that you can just kind of go to a big box store or a hardware store and buy, but then the same exact brand will make a Pro Series model. Sometimes the verbiage is different, but just realize a lot of the big brands out there do make two different types of thermostats, two different series, if you will. And you might say, well, what's the big deal? What's the difference? Sometimes there's not a whole lot of difference. Sometimes the Pro Series will actually have features or added programming controls that you can adjust that the retail side will not have. And sometimes the Pro Series, they're just made a little better. I don't know that that's necessarily true with a lot of cases, but I do know a few years ago, if you bought a Honeywell thermostat, there was a certain line that if you bought it in the store versus the one that we could get as pros from our suppliers, there was a significant difference. You could actually see it, you could feel it, and it was a little bit better of a thermostat for not much more money. Is it a real big deal? I would say across the board, for the most part, it's not always necessarily a bad thing or a big deal if you want to just get a regular old thermostat in your local hardware store. It will usually serve your needs. Number 47, a lot of thermostats have multiple schedules or settings when it comes to the days of the week. In some cases, it may not matter to you, But if it does matter to you, just keep in mind when you're buying or you're shopping for your next thermostat that it may say 5.2 or 5.1.1 or 7-day programming. And so all that means is if it says 5 and 2, that just means you get 2 options. So you're going to have your settings for the middle of the week and the 2 weekend days. 5.1.1 would simply be your settings for the week, Saturday, Sunday, and then of course 7-day programming means you can have a different schedule for each and every day. Number 48. One of the questions we get a lot of times when we're talking about thermostats is a lot of folks will ask us, hey, what should I set my thermostat at? You know, what's the right temperature? What's the right scenario? What should I set my temperature at if I'm not home? I think to answer the first question is there's no actual real answer to answer that question. When you're talking about comfort, every house is different, every thermostat is different, and every market is different. So for example, there are parts of the USA that are more drier than other parts that are more humid. Well, 72 degrees in a real dry area does not feel the same as a humid area. The more humid it is, typically it feels a little more warmer in that area. Now, there are articles all over the internet, you can Google it, where it talks about if you're used to this temperature, but it's wintertime, if you were to just get used to 1 degree less, you could save this much energy per year. If you'd set it 2 degrees lower, you'd save even more. I think for the most part, if you are keeping in mind that there are backup heat sources and you're doing your best to not adjust the temperature with huge swings, even with the programming, you could actually save a little bit of energy, still be comfortable, and not have to worry about some of the other things we've talked about in our other videos, meaning heat droop and backup heat stage timers and things like that. And then finally, what should you set it at when you're not home? For us, people in my market, I typically tell them if it's wintertime, don't set your thermostat any lower than 60 degrees. And that's just something that I got years ago when I was dealing with a lot of apartment complexes. That was kind of the temperature that they would usually tell the tenants. They would say, hey, if you leave your apartment, if a college kid goes home for Christmas, they would say, leave your heat on, don't turn it off, and don't set it any lower than 60. I think the main thing or the thought process there is just because it's 60 degrees in that room where the thermostat is, there are other parts of your house. When we're talking about under your kitchen cabinet where there's plumbing lines, or even the crawl space or inside your walls, there are chances for those areas that are not necessarily conditioned to get even cooler. And obviously you don't want them to get below freezing and bust a pipe. And then as far as summertime goes, I usually don't set a thermostat any higher than 80. If your house were to get above 80 degrees, I've heard horror stories where folks have horrible things happening in their house, paint peeling, problems with their hardwood floors and things like that if it gets super, super hot in their house. So I would say 80 degrees. I wouldn't really set it any higher than that. And that's pretty manageable, right? So if you keep in mind, most air conditioning systems have a delta T temperature, meaning it goes in the return and comes out a 20 degree, 20-ish, sometimes a little higher, but ultimately 20 degree difference. Well, if you had that thermostat set even higher than 80, and then you come home and you're trying to get it down to, a manageable, a 72 degrees, just a comfortable temperature, and you've got it now, it's way up above 80, it's gonna take a long time to get all the way back down to a comfortable temperature. Why? Because everything in your house holds heat. Your floors, your walls, your furniture, everything like that holds heat. So you're not just cooling the air in the space, you gotta cool all that stuff down too. Number 49. I've touched on this in some of my other videos, and one thing that is kind of controversial is I believe as a homeowner, if a contractor sells you a thermostat, really if he sells you anything, but let's just say he sells you a thermostat, whether it was with a new system or just cause he just sold you a new thermostat for one reason or another, a lot of pros think you're too dumb as a homeowner, that you're not qualified, that you're not allowed to have the manual that comes with that thermostat. I don't subscribe to that belief. I personally think if you bought the thermostat, it's your thermostat, and you want the manual, by gosh, you should have the manual. That's my personal opinion. And I don't think I'm smarter than every homeowner out there, right? I think there is something to be said for if you don't know what you're doing and you're in the programming, yes, you could create more problems. But I think if you're watching this video and you're one of those homeowners that's kind of handy and you actually can go in and adjust the programming or adjust this or adjust that, then you should have the manual. So what do you do if your pro did not give you the manual? So your pro came in, he put in a thermostat for you, and now you got this new thermostat, but no manual. Sometimes thermostats will come with 2 manuals. They'll have the installation or troubleshooting manual, and then they'll have a user manual. And the difference is the user manual is more for the homeowner to be able to set their own schedule or how to operate it, you know, what buttons mean and things like that. That would be the user manual. So the pro might give them that, but then they still keep the manual that has all the goodies in it. So what do you do if he did that? A lot of thermostats can be found online. And if you can't find it online, you can approach the manufacturer. If all else fails, if you're one of the subscribers to our website, newhvacguide.com, you can actually message us and we will send you the manual. And then finally, number 50, we've gone through all 49 if you've watched all the videos, and we're now to number 50, and I've saved the best for last, and that is if you don't know what you're doing with that thermostat, please call a pro. If it's above your knowledge, you're not really sure what you're doing, you're not really sure what to set this at or how to wire it or whatever, the problems you could create if you don't know what you're doing would not be worth the couple dollars that you would save by doing it yourself. I know that's kind of a little backwards from the last step that I said, but I think in the grand scheme of things, if you get to something and you're not sure and you're just trying to save a dollar or two, just realize you could be opening a whole can of worms. You could be creating more problems for yourself just by saving a couple dollars from hiring a pro. Just hire the pro. Avoid the headaches. All that said, if you've watched this series and you have any comments or questions, please comment down below. That said, if you are in the market for a new heating and air system, before you spend thousands, go to our website, newhvacguide.com. This website has so much information. I basically wrote a book, but I put it on this website so it can never become outdated. And my goal is to help you as a homeowner so you don't get scammed, so you don't have the same headaches that a lot of other homeowners have. If you follow this guide, my hope and dream is that everything goes through smoothly. A lot of information on this website, manufacturers and contractors don't even want you to know. I've got a whole page called no-nos. I've got a whole page for good and bad heating and air brands. So again, before you spend thousands, check out that website. But that's all I have. Thanks for watching. Please hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next time.